A couple of weeks ago, I had a meltdown, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. And I'm talking about a full on anger descending into tears, panic attack inducing, curled up after and fell asleep kind of meltdown. The trigger? Well, that doesn't always matter because it's never the actual cause, right? This time was no different. The trigger was someone hurting my feelings, a friend who did it often, but this time it was just on the wrong day. But that's not why I had the meltdown. The meltdown was due to being exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. I'd forgotten the words from Tricia Hersey, aka the Nap Bishop, and author of Rest is Resistance, a manifesto. She says, I wish you rest today. I wish you a deep knowing that exhaustion is not a normal way of living. You are enough. You can rest. You must resist anything that doesn't center your divinity as a human being. You are worthy of care. I had forgotten. I had forgotten that resting was vital for my survival, and especially as someone with invisible disabilities and neurodiversity. I knew it was brewing, and I tried hard to keep it at bay. I'd been blowing off steam wherever I could without affecting anyone. I'd scream at bad drivers in my car, only when the windows were up. I'd be snarky with friends. I'd sit quietly when I could, trying to ground myself. And it worked for a time. And then I'd read another article or a post. If I wasn't careful, sometimes I'd end up catching a bit of the news and I'd feel that pressure building again, which was one reason I was so exhausted. The other, I'd cobbled together a client base in such a way that I accidentally made myself work every day without a full day off. And I wasn't sleeping well. I'd sleep, but my dreams kept me running and hiding all night. Exhaustion leads to burnout. And I knew that. I also knew it wasn't sustainable and I had to do something. And yet I still had the meltdown. That was on a Thursday. And the following Friday, a week later, I spent the entire day in bed with a migraine so bad that I'd considered going to the hospital. I hadn't really done anything to resolve the exhaustion and stress from the week prior. And sometimes my body has to get my attention in very loud ways. And the reason I'm telling you all of this today is to both serve as an object lesson and a warning. We have been under the constant onslaught of appointees, executive orders, fear mongering, and the news of thousands losing their jobs. And that's been the point because we can't process it. When 20 wild and horrible things happen in one day, it's difficult to prioritize, pay attention, and process. And if we can't process, we can't think and research and remember. And if we're running around trying to make sense and trying to keep people safe and wondering and waiting for the next awful thing, we don't have time to organize. We don't have energy to organize. We don't have brain power to organize. And that's why it's the point. The overwhelm, the fear, the confusion. It's all the point when a dictator tries to come to power. We've seen it before, and yet we've seen nothing like this at the same time. Will you take a breath with me? And let's take one more together. And this time, I encourage you to drop your shoulders and unclench your jaw as you're able. These days, I have to remind myself to do that throughout the day, all through the day. Burnout is real and it's scary. Burnout is your mind and your body and your spirit saying, nope, you're going to take a break one way or another. Burnout is the fuse on an explosive, and that explosive is within you. Burnout is a small spark, probably from static electricity, that ignites a fuse and it can't be blown out. That explosion hurts a lot of people. You primarily, those close to you, likely. Burnout is not just a meltdown that leads to taking a nap and then everything is better. No, burnout can cause longer term issues: depression, anxiety, panic attacks, body pains, illness. The fallout from burnout can cause damage to your relationships, your job, your hobbies, your physical and mental health. For me, when I hit a hard burnout stage, and yes, it has happened enough times that I know my pattern, I get weepy and angry. My sense of justice gets tempered by a sense of despair. I harden my heart and I try to stop caring. My brain gets foggy and I can't put together plans for how to get out of my house in the morning. Forget about planning any type of resistance. And again, that's the point of the overwhelm. They want us in burnout and despair because they assume we'll give up, because we'll want to. Let's take another breath together. And one more. So, how do we avoid burnout when all of this is happening? Rest. I'm serious, rest. And I'm talking about more than just getting 8 hours of sleep a night. I'm talking about taking a rest from social media, from news, from despair. Lean into and rest in joy, in community, in silence, in silly, easy shows that make you happy, in getting outside and literally touching grass. It's counterintuitive, I know. But let me tell you another story that's a bit of a flashback. Way back in 2014, when I started seminary, I chose Fridays as my day off from anything that didn't bring me joy. So I didn't do housework, I didn't do schoolwork, I didn't even write sermons. And during seminary, I would use this day to knit or crochet or catch up on television. And twice a month, I'd game with friends. And other than during intensives or ministerial gatherings, I kept Friday as my Sabbath all the way up until this January. January, I returned to work in the writing center at the school. January, when I started picking up tutoring clients outside of my writing center job. January, when I thought it would be a good idea to try to get a bunch of students on Fridays when I was home. January, when an administration took office. First couple of weeks, I missed a day at the center and had to work on Fridays to make up my hours. Then I picked up a couple of clients for Friday afternoon. And then the next thing I knew, I was screaming about how I didn't have a full day off and had been working for 3 weeks without a break. That was on that Thursday. The next day, I took a 3-day break from Facebook, mostly because that was the first thing I was checking in the morning for news. I checked in with friends. I spent the next 3 days sitting on the couch and knitting when I wasn't tutoring. I made myself take deep breaths anytime I caught myself feeling tightened up. And this would be a great story if I told you that I was all better by Monday. It would be. It'd be fiction, but it'd be a good story. By Monday, I felt exhausted. But the good news was I could feel it now. I could feel my emotions again, too. I took baby steps back into Facebook. I quit watching the news on television. It's the voices and the tone that trigger me the most, so that's one way I can mitigate that. And that whole week, I felt wrung out. I'd come home from the school and be in bed before 8:30 p.m. And that Friday was my massive migraine. So my body wasn't quite done processing the burnout. And I'm still not fully back. But here's the thing, I'm still here. I'm taking those moments to rest. I'm taking those moments to step back for a bit. I'm taking the time to allow my thoughts to roam and come back together and be useful for myself and hopefully for others. Sadly, I don't have all the answers. Well, I like to think I have some answers, some of the time. And when I first planned this sermon, my goal was to remind you and me, because I always preach to myself, you all just get to listen in, about the importance of rest and joy in surviving the times we are in. I had planned for it to feel good, to encourage you, to remind you of our calling to work for justice and peace in this world. Then, as I spent my new restructured Sabbath, which now runs from Thursday at 5 p.m. to Friday at 4 p.m., the time I leave my day job to my next tutoring client, I realized I was a smidge calmer. I haven't had a headache in a few days. I work to disconnect when I need to, and I've been able to lower the risk of a severe burnout. I'm not all the way there, and I'm not sure I will be, but I am finding my way and adjusting as I need to get real time off. Tricia Hersey says in her book, resting is for everyone caught up in the web of grind culture. We must never forget that grind culture is a sinister collaboration between capitalism and white supremacy. When viewed from this lens, we are all caught up in these toxic systems, born, raised, and trained from birth under the same curriculum. Those who are wealthy, as well as those who are poor, are caught up in the spiritual deficiency that occurs when you are tied to a system like capitalism in any way. We are all harmed in unique ways. This fact is supported by studying history. It's hard to know where to begin, but ideas from Hersey include detoxing from social media weekly, monthly, or more, healing from the individual trauma you have experienced that makes it difficult for you to say no and maintain healthy boundaries. Start a daily practice of daydreaming. This one's the hard one, except that there is no quick fix, magic bullet, or instant change. Slow down. She reminds us you are enough now. Exhaustion is not productive. You are not resting to gain energy to be more productive. Listen more and create systems of community care. What we face as a country will be a marathon, not a sprint, and we must take care of ourselves and each other to survive. Make room to rest, for it is a resistance. Amen. Blessed be, and may it ever be so.